Now, what does the story of Beauty and the Beast and your toxic relationship with a narcissistic person have in common? Well, obviously, both are fairy tale relationships, but there's also the fact that both contain a lot of false narratives, false hopes, and the high likelihood of Stockholm Syndrome. My name is Kevin, and this is The Royal We. Now, there's all kinds of reasons as to why people stay stuck in toxic relationships. Some of the reasons include dependency issues. Some include financial reasons. But one of the worst reasons to stay stuck in a toxic relationship is because of this idea that behind the narcissistic rage, behind the mask of cruelty and aggression and hostility, is a sweet, caring, genuine person and the possibility of a happily ever after. Now, we call this a false narrative and a false hope. But where do we get these false narrative ideas from? We don't just develop these things on our own. No. These are through stories and through fairy tales that are given to us throughout our lives. And it's for this reason I'm going to be reacting to and offering my critique of a very popular cartoon called Beauty and the Beast. Because when you are dealing with narcissistic abuse, you are in fact experiencing that beast.
Hey, stop!
Get out!
No!
Get out!
And that's an accurate portrayal of narcissistic rage. It's that 5-year-old temper tantrum in a monstrous body. And now naturally, we are designed to get away from such toxic and dangerous behavior. We have fight or flight responses. We have adrenaline that kicks in. Yet, for some reason, we feel inspired to stay, to endure, to wait for the possibility that behind that narcissistic rage is a prince or a princess. Now, as heartwarming and as charming as that appears, it is potentially dangerous in that it creates a false hope built upon a foundation of false narratives. Now, the false hope there is that if you endure narcissistic abuse, you can get to your happily ever after, right? And now the false narrative, which is your part, my part, is that if we love hard enough and strong enough and unconditionally, then we have the power to transform narcissistic rage into a kind, caring, loving person. And now why is that a false narrative? Well, because it's just not true. It's not the reality of the world that we live in. If that was the truth and if that was the reality, then Jesus never would have went to the cross. You see, a lot of people focus on Jesus going to the cross as being a display of God's sacrificial love for people, and it is. However, at the same time, it's also a display of exposing the hearts of humanity, of exposing the reality that no matter how much truth Jesus spoke, no matter how much love Jesus gave, it wasn't enough to stop the cold, cruel, malicious, narcissistic hearts of humanity from nailing him to the cross. Do you see that there? We need to consider this. And so this brings us to potentially a different story within Beauty and the Beast, a story that ends not with Beauty transforming the Beast, because as we discussed, that is not likely possible. Rather, it could potentially be a story of Beauty transforming the way in which she sees the Beast. And now we're getting into the territory of Stockholm Syndrome. What is Stockholm Syndrome, by the way? It's a syndrome in which captives and prisoners develop a psychological bond with their abusers, with their oppressors, with their captors. It's something that's not studied a lot of, but it is something, and it's something to pay attention to. And so now the story of Beauty and the Beast takes on a whole new meaning, because by the end of it, the Beast and the charming, loving, giving prince are still one and the same, but perhaps Beauty has transformed the way in which she sees the abusive person. She gets the same. The Beast and the prince are one still. beauty accepts it. Now, it's important to understand these narratives so that we can better understand how we make decisions in our own lives. And for this reason, I want to go through some of the other difficult to understand narratives that we can get from Beauty and the Beast, because there's quite a few of them in that cartoon, and perhaps you can see how this may have influenced some of your decisions in life as it may have influenced some decisions in my life. So to begin with, right from the get-go of the movie, we see the lead character, Belle, who represents you, represents me. She's skipping along through her town, singing a song. And if you look past the cuteness of the melody and the cuteness of the illustrations and the funny-looking characters, we'll get there in a minute, what you're going to hear is a big complaint. What she's really complaining about is how boring the town is that she lives in. Why does she say it's boring? She says it's boring because it's functioning, because it's stable, because people have routines, because people are committed. She might as well be singing this. Well, look, there goes the same old boring baker, with his same old boring bread. Everything is just the same. Nothing ever changes in this old provincial town, right? And if you look up the word provincial, one of the definitions of it is that it's narrow-minded. And so the false narrative in this is that routines, stability, and functionality can be considered narrow-minded and really boring. Now, this is dangerous thinking. Why? Because in reality, you need routine. You need functionality. You need stability. That is the foundations of building anything in life. And to call that boring and to disregard it, well, shame on you, right? But that's the message. It's a false narrative. And that leads into the second false narrative that we see. Not only is the stability and the functionality and the routines boring, but look at everybody in the town, for crying out loud. Everybody that represents stability and functionality and routine in the town is goofy looking and fat and ugly and bald. By the way, Disney, what do you got against bald guys, huh? Just saying. But they're very awkward and they're very goofy looking. And so the message is to associate routines and stability with awkward and goofy. Pretty ridiculous. That's a false narrative. The reality is that there's nothing awkward or goofy about people who are stable, people who have routines. As a matter of fact, that's what's most desirable, is it not? How many of you right now, especially after dealing with narcissistic abuse, would love some stability in your life, would love somebody to bring some routine back into your life? Now, this goes to the next false narrative, and that is this, that the only people worth looking at, the people that everybody should aspire to become or be with, is one of two main characters in the cartoon. One is the overt narcissistic popular bully Gaston. The other is the quiet, covert, hiding in the shadows narcissistic individual known as the Beast, who would prefer prisoners over relationships.
Nothing you can do. He's my prisoner.
Oh, there must be some way I can...
Now, that's a false narrative, and I don't even have to begin to explain why. I think all of us are pretty tired of admiring the bullying type and the quiet, hiding in the shadows type, right? We all know now that that leads to really dark paths in life. Now then, let's go on to the next false narrative that we see in the cartoon, and that is that when you are involved in a toxic, dysfunctional relationship with a narcissistic individual, that all you need to do is lock yourself in the bedroom, lock yourself behind the door, and the narcissism will eventually just go away. It'll just calm down. Now, we know that that's not true. When you are in a toxic relationship, narcissistic abuse is progressive. It keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Listen, in the real world, in reality, narcissistic abusive people don't have pots and pans talking to them and speaking into their conscious. It's just you and the abusive person. And so the false narrative there is that all you have to do is close the door and lock it and eventually it'll go away. That's not true. The reality is you need to get away from the toxicity and not look back. And this brings us to the next false narrative. And that is that You shouldn't run from a toxic, dysfunctional situation with a narcissistic person because it is more dangerous for you outside of that relationship. And this is something that abusive people even try to make you believe and feel. And that's why it's a false narrative. Don't run away from the abuse. Don't get out of the toxic relationship. It's more dangerous out there. There's wolves out there. You're not strong enough to make it on your own. You won't survive in that cold, cruel world. Stay here where you're my prisoner. And that's obviously a false narrative. Your chances of surviving away from the toxic relationship are far greater than staying in the dysfunctional relationship. You are strong enough to deal with the wolves of the real world because you know how to identify them. You're capable of navigating them. And it's better to do that. You don't need a narcissistic, abusive person to be your protector while also keeping you as a prisoner, if you will. That's a false narrative. And that leads us to the final false narrative that I've discovered in the movie, and it goes without question, and that is the final transformation. That your love, your unconditional, pure, perfect love can transform a narcissistic personality into a good, loving, caring, genuine person. And this is how the movie ends. Now, that is a false narrative because your love, my love, as we said earlier, is not capable of changing anything. We have a difficult enough time changing ourselves in this life. So to believe that we have the power to transform somebody else is ridiculous. It, again, brings the potential of changing the story. It's not that you change another person. The only thing that you could possibly potentially change is the way you see an abusive person, a narcissistic person. You potentially start to see the narcissistic behavior as good. You start to develop a psychological bond of compassion and empathy. You start to view the narcissistic behavior, instead of being bad, as being good, as being right. And I'm not sure where that path leads or what that says about you, and I'm not sure what it says about beauty at the end of the story either. I guess that's left up to other people's interpretations, and I allow you the opportunity to leave your comments down below and your interpretation of what the ending of Beauty and the Beast and the whole story could potentially mean and what it could potentially be saying about Beauty and the Beast. And listen, I know that these are difficult concepts to understand, and I want to let you know that I am here for you to help you on your healing journey. Down below, you'll find access to one-on-one appointments with me. We could have a telephone call, a FaceTime or a WhatsApp video call, or a text message consultation. You'll find direct links to my calendar down below. In addition to that, you'll find access to Monday Night Live Chat at 9 p.m. Central Time, and Saturday morning is Royal We Fellowship at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. In addition to that, follow me on Instagram at JoinTheRoyalWe, and I'll be back with more videos for you right here on The Royal We.